Have you ever heard of the brand Driftless Quality Wear? Well, now you're about to. Driftless Quality Wear is an outdoor apparel brand focused on providing quality gear to help you take on the outdoors. So, the Art of Football 365 has decided to partner with Driftless Quality Wear, and now check out their website, www.driftlessqualitywear.com. All of the Art of Football 365 fans are eligible for a 10% off coupon on every product eligible on their website using the code FOOTBALL365. Thank you very much.
Hey Brock, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you guys?
Pretty good.
What's going on, man? How you been?
Pretty good. How about you guys? Or how about you?
Not
too
pretty
bad.
good. Appreciate
You guys get all your snow shoveled?
Oh yeah.
It took a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, welcome back. This is episode 8, segment 2, and this time we're joined by head Aquin football high school coach Broc Kundert, and we're gonna get to know a little bit about his story today and how he worked his way up to be a head coach in football. So I just want to start off and kind of ask you and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself for our audience and what you do for a living and how you got involved in coaching.
Yeah, so I've been coaching for I think this will be my 8th year total. I'm from Freeport, Illinois. Went to Freeport High School. Ended up going to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville for college. Played football up there. I currently teach at Freeport High School and then coach football at Aquin. You know, just as a young kid, I kind of always felt like coaching was something that I was, kind of supposed to do. Initially, I really enjoyed the X's and O's and planning, how to beat this defense or how to stop this offense. But I don't know, the more you get into it, that stuff kind of fades away and you realize that, motivating kids and teaching them, perseverance, things like that is far, far, far more important than, the scheme you run. If there was a perfect scheme, everybody would be running that same scheme, So that part of it's just really fascinated me, as I've gotten more into it, which kind of gets off the topic of what we're talking about. But just born and bred in Freeport. I like the town, love the town. It's great being able to coach at Freeport and then just drive down the road and coach at Aquin. So I feel like I get to impact, both sides of the community, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched a little bit on your route of education with high school and with Freeport and then on to UW-Platteville. And, was it always football? Kind of was there maybe another sport or something? And, how did your life and athletics kind of shape you into coaching?
Yeah, so I, growing up, I'm not super old, but I'm old enough to the point where video games wasn't really the passion of a lot of young kids like it is today. I'm sure if I was a kid today, I'd be playing Fortnite for hours as well, because that stuff's pretty cool. But, growing up as a kid, just the neighborhood we lived in, we would go, play baseball for hours all day. And then there's actually another neighborhood. It's kind of cool. That was just a couple, probably about half a mile away. We kind of lived out in the country. And like our little neighborhood would go play their neighborhood and like baseball all the time. I played baseball, football, wrestling all since I was a little kid. Just the lessons you learn through sports is, I don't know if you can learn them other places, things like perseverance. And, my dad always coached me and he always taught me, some really good lessons, even though at a lot of times I freaking hated his guts because he was hard on me. But, growing up, you definitely appreciate that stuff. And I had a ton of great coaches growing up as a kid. So that helped. And that kind of just pushed me into teaching. School was always fun for me. I enjoyed it. But I always knew I wanted to coach. And honestly, I knew that going to college to be a teacher was my best route to becoming a coach, at the high school level. Someday I wouldn't mind maybe popping into the college ranks and seeing what that's like. But for right now, coaching in a high school is fantastic. I coached wrestling for about 5 years at the middle school level as well. We had some pretty good success. A lot of really good kids came through there. And And that was a totally different animal, teaching middle school kids how to wrestle compared to high school kids how to play football. But it was fun.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I found one thing that you mentioned very important when you said that it instills life lessons for you. That's what sports does for you, and I find that very important because, like, for anyone who doesn't play sports or anybody who plays one sport, every sport teaches different lessons. I mean, they all have correlation and they collide together. But at the end of the day, life lessons come from sports, and it's very valuable to take those in and learn as you play. So I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit more into your football world and kind of ask you about what is it like about football that you enjoy most? I know you mentioned the X's and O's early on, but is there something about it that like keeps you around the game, or has it just always been a passion of yours?
Yeah, I mean, football's awesome. I mean, it's an American thing. I feel like, everybody, Saturdays are for college football, Fridays are for high school football, and Sundays are for the NFL football. And I mean, even this year, COVID sucks, but it's been kind of cool to watch football on pretty much every night of the week. Just with rescheduling and things like that. I mean, it's just the sport of it's super interesting. When we were in college, we had he was actually, I believe he was a Catholic priest, but he was a priest he was in the military. So he was a military priest. So he saw some stuff. He gave a lot of guys their last rites and things like that. And he made a great analogy of how football is very similar to combat. Obviously, it's totally different in a lot of regards as well. But, in football, if you have one guy that messes up, say the center messes up the snap, something like that, that throws off 11 different people. You know what I mean? Like that just ruins the entire thing. If one guy, doesn't fit into the right gap as a linebacker, it's a touchdown, So the part of football where you need to, you have to rely on each other. And, you have to trust each other, and that's hard, and that's hard to teach kids to do because, I mean, a lot of kids and, a lot of adults, it's hard to trust people. But, those really, really great teams get that with each other. They trust and know that, their buddy next to them is going to do what they're supposed to. So that part of football is just – I find that unique that you don't really have that in many other sports. Baseball, if you got a pitcher and catcher, a pitcher that's just absolutely dominating, you can win a game 1-0. And the other, 7 fielders might not have a lot to do with it. In basketball, that's become much more of an individualized sport where if you have the best player, more often than not, you can win. But in football, there's very few cases where just one guy, without the help of other guys, really can just absolutely take over a game or do something like that. So I think that's probably the best part about football for me. It's a collective effort. And I think that makes it, really unique for sports.
Yeah, you kind of talked about earlier, you graduated from Freeport and then coached and taught and still currently teach at Freeport, and now you're the head Aquin football coach. Just kind of when you talk about the connection, with the big school, small school, being able to coach at both, and then, kind of having your life intertwined in both schools at the same time. Just kind of talk on that. How's that helped you coach? Because 2 different scenarios with people back home with background lights and everything. And, kind of what's your perspective on both and what have you gained from both?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. A lot of people, it was kind of a thing that, that's probably the most popular question that people ask me, especially, kids that I coached at Freeport or people, that I'm still in touch with that I coached with there. Like, what's the difference between a school of, 1,200 kids to a school of, barely 100 kids, and, the roster sizes and everything's are different. But the main, it's really not as different as you would think. Kids at Freeport have their own issues, things that they need help with. And, as a coach, especially at the high school level, it's all about, helping kids to be successful, whatever they need, to be successful after the sport that you coach them in. That's why most people get into coaching, So the kids at Freeport needed things, to help them be successful after football. And the kids at Aquin, they might not need the same things, but they still need things that's going to help them in the next part of their life to be successful. So that part, the short answer with a really long answer is it's not really as different as people think. At Freeport, we were playing schools that had 100 kids on their roster. We were lucky if we had 40. So we were always the smaller school, playing against other schools. At Aquin, we have last year, I think we played 13 total guys pretty much the whole season. sprinkled with a couple guys helping out on special teams, things like that. Going against some schools that have 30, 40 juniors and seniors. So the size. It's actually
that actually is pretty similar.
Yeah, it wasn't, that part wasn't an adjustment, at all. Some little things like, for practice at Aquin, we, our starters are usually juniors and seniors, and our, second string guys are usually freshmen and sophomores. So for practice, things need to be modified. Kind of just the way you do things, a little bit more like half line type stuff where you got seniors going against seniors, because it doesn't do a freshman any good or a senior any good for a freshman just to get absolutely pounded by a senior, the whole practice. That doesn't make the senior better. And usually, in my opinion, that's going to make the freshman kind of resent football, which that's not always the case. And I know some people probably wouldn't agree, maybe that's going to toughen the kid up or something like that. For me, I think toughness is gained through confidence, in the weight room, seeing things like that, So that really didn't affect my philosophy too much. And, the main thing with coaching and me, at Freeport, you had to build relationships. You had to get the kids to trust you, and you had to show them that you cared. From day one at Aquin, I've been trying to do things to show the kids that I care and that they can trust me and do things like that. And I think that's been the biggest factor of success for us. When things are open and we're able to go to the school, we get probably 95 to 100% attendance to the weight room every day. And that's totally because from the get-go, I did my best to be in the weight room, working as hard as they were, showing them that this is going to be a result and it's going to be success, so just really showing that you care at both places. I think that's just the biggest factor of a successful coach, showing the kids that, we're here for you. And we can do our best, to be successful together, and hopefully they learn some things, going from there.
Yeah. And I feel like you mentioned, I feel like the most important aspect of being a good coach is developing that firsthand relationship with the kids and being able to have trust go both ways, back and forth. I think it's okay for a coach to just trust his players, but if the players aren't trusting their coach, then the team's not going to go anywhere. You need that back and forth operation, and I think that's something you've developed. I mean, I've seen it firsthand at Aquin. Lately, I've seen guys on the football team buy in a lot more than certain people did when I played in high school at Aquin, and it's definitely a culture shift, and I think you're doing a great job with that. So I wanted to mention that and just thank you for that, and kind of touch on it a little bit and just
yeah, for sure.
Kind of
dive in. At the end of the day, and this is, I don't know if I'll coach at Aquin for 100 years, I mean, great if I can, but wherever I'm at, and wherever I decide to go or end up going, at the end of the day, football is a game. And if it's not fun for the kids, and I never want it to be a case where a kid is afraid to make a mistake because I'm going to jump down his throat and he's going to be embarrassed from all of his friends and his buddies and his parents, just because I don't think there's a benefit to that a ton. I mean, I think if you show the kids that you care, you can be hard on them, but it never has to be make this kid cry, or something like that, because that's an ultimate breaker of trust, So that's kind of always been my philosophy in all sports. I'll yell and get on a kid if I need to, but like my first year of coaching, I think it was, and I can't even tell you who told me this, but it was a great analogy. He said, view coaching as a bank, right? You can't take any money out of the bank if you don't put a deposit into the bank, so that's how I view kids. I can't expect them to do something that's going to be really, really hard if I don't put a deposit into it first, show them that they can do it, or that how this is going to benefit them, or that I care enough to be pushing them this hard. You know what I mean? So that's just something that's stuck with me since coaching, from a young age. And I think it works.
Oh yeah. And I agree 100%. I think it goes both ways. And I know you and I kind of touched on we texted back and forth during my first semester at college, just talking about some books, and you gave me some stuff that I could look at for early on coaching, and I kind of wanted to ask you now, after discussing a little bit about that, what are some of your favorite articles, magazines, books that you've used to study coaching?
Yeah, so I mean, I got a subscription to Sports Illustrated. There's not a ton about coaching in there, but some of the stories and showing the kids that I feel like every kid thinks their circumstance is only something that's happening to them. But, just going through there and seeing circumstances where kids can see, oh, man, this, pro football player had the same life I did or had the same thing happen to them, and look at how successful they are. I think that's a huge part of coaching, getting that out of your kids. I mean, some websites I like, Coach Huey is a great website for football coaching. It's free. You just got to create a login and a password, and it's basically just an open message board where you can just, shoot ideas out there, ask a question, whatever you want, and there's hundreds of coaches on there, and they'll respond. Everybody that I've talked to on there has been super nice. Like, you can send them a message privately and be like, hey, could I get that presentation you were talking about? Or, hey, could I call you some night and we could talk this over? So that's kind of the great thing about the coaching community. I don't know as much about other sports, but in football, I mean, nothing that we're doing at Aquin is something that we invented. Everything's already been invented for football and things like that. So people are super willing to like share with whatever you want, ask about anything. Football Scoops and awesome website. Twitter's great for anything. I love reading anything about Nick Saban. He's a great X's and O coach, maybe one of the best defensive coordinators of all time. But the stuff that he talks about, now, that motivation factor, in his fourth quarter program, and just how to get, he was one of the first coaches to really get a psychologist on staff to kind of, teach more of the mental side of things. So I love that stuff. And like I kind of touched on, I don't read a ton presently about like X's and O's. There's all kinds of stuff out there. Really like the leadership stuff and the motivation and how to teach kids perseverance, things like that. That's the stuff that interests me at this point. So that's kind of what I'm reading more. Like, I like to read a lot of, military type books. The Art of War, I read that book. There's all kinds of things that, if you can teach lessons, I think you can teach any scheme. So that's kind of the main thing that I've really been diving into as of late.
Yeah, I mean, kind of talking with when you said Nick Saban there, kind of what some of your other coaches, it could be some of your high school coaches that you coach alongside with, or your high school coaches, or maybe some college or NFL, some former ones, current ones, what are some coaches that kind of stick out to you that you kind of maybe resemble a little bit?
I mean, I learned a ton from, Coach Wickman and Coach Avery at Freeport. They were huge. They know football. And then college-wise, Rob Erickson, he was my defensive coordinator at Platteville, and then he went to Whitewater, and now he's at South Dakota State. We keep in touch. I probably text him, once a month or so. He's kind of my scheme guy. Like, hey, how are you defending zone read? Or what are you doing with this pass concept? Things like that. He's brilliant defensive mind. Offensively, Coach Emmendorfer at Platteville, he's kind of one of the first air raid guys. And I wouldn't consider myself a air raid, chuck it 80 times guy. But I think a lot of those schemes are super, super innovative. Kind of the cool thing about our staff is we kind of got a mix. I don't even know what my offensive philosophy would be if I had to pick one. I kind of like a mix of a ton of different stuff. Coach Blackburn is a big shotgun, spread them out to run the ball, tons of pass concepts. He's great with that kind of stuff. And then Coach Grant is kind of interesting. He's another guy with us that came from Colorado. And he like lives and breathes like option football, like what Navy and Army and Air Force and those schools run. So it's kind of cool that we kind of have like a weird mix of like, and I think our offense kind of reflects that, like Coach Blackburn, we're in the shotgun all the time, which I think is, great for the quarterback. But every one of our run plays has some sort of read in it where our quarterback can either keep it or give it to the running back or throw it out the receiver. And that's kind of where, those two guys' philosophies kind of have meshed, and our offense just keeps evolving with different things like that. Which I guess that I'm pretty good at going on from a different question or kind of just going on a rant. So let me know if I need to stop anytime.
Oh, you're good.
But yeah, other coaches that I really like, to read about. Lou Tepper. I mean, I played linebacker and I coached linebackers. He's probably the greatest. He wrote I think he called most people call it the linebacker Bible. It's super good. I've read that. I like Coach O. I haven't read anything on him. Lincoln Riley, I've read a lot of his stuff. I think he's great. As far as NFL coaches, I don't really dive into a ton of NFL guys just because, what they're doing, I don't think really translates to high school kids that much. I mean, they have handpicked dudes that run 4.4s and offensive linemen that are 320 and can move absolutely like freaks. You know what I mean? So like, I guess I never really have dived into a ton. I think Mike Tomlin's great. They've been, I don't think he's ever had a losing season in the NFL, which is awesome. Um, I'm a Bears fan, and I'm a staunch supporter of Matt Nagy. I think he might not be a great offensive play caller, but I think his players play hard for him, and I think that that's something at the NFL level, especially that. I mean, those dudes got to trust you as much as anybody because no matter what, they're getting paid. You know what I mean? So to get dudes collectively to, work together and play hard for something, bigger than them, I think that takes a special kind of motivation, and you got to be good. And I think he's done a decent job with that part of coaching football. So I guess those are a couple guys that I really like as coaches.
No, for sure. And kind of based on the coaches that you just kind of mentioned, diving into a coaching staff and stuff like that, I kind of want to ask you, when you initially became the head coach at Aquin, how did you go about picking a coaching staff when becoming a head coach? Like, was it about like the certain friends you had, or was it like more of a he's good at this, good at that?
Yeah. Coaching staff's kind of a tricky thing, as a young guy. I mean, I think I'm somewhat young, at least in the coaching realm. I'm only 31, but you definitely want a staff that is going to challenge you. A lot of, me and Coach Blackburn, Grind, Doherty, I wouldn't say that we necessarily agree very often, which I think that's a good thing. Because I don't want a staff that I put out an idea and they're like, yeah, that's going to work. Because, I mean, we don't really know if it's going to work. So I want what's the negatives to it? What's the positives to it? A lot of stuff that, any of us have really put out there, we are not afraid to shoot each other down. So I think there's like a trust level there and a respect level when it comes to football where we're not afraid to say like hard stuff to each other. And I think that goes a long way on a staff. I consider all the guys on staff my friends. We talk all the time and know each other's families, things like that. I wouldn't say that needs to be a deal breaker, though. In college, I don't know that our head coach and our defensive coordinator really got along, behind closed doors. But when they were coaching together during a game, it didn't matter. Everybody's there to win, and that didn't hinder our success. So I don't know that being necessarily friends is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing with, hiring a staff, knowing somebody before is always going to be a benefit. You kind of know what you're getting into, but kind of the cool thing about the coaching network, and I don't know, I know Bryce, you really want to get into coaching again, and not 100% sure what your interest as far as that goes, but the coaching network, I mean, there's people out there everywhere that, you might not even heard of a guy that's living 3 houses away from you or something like that. There's people that have coached before, and in most cases, if you're getting people, telling you about these guys, they're probably pretty good guys. I've never had a case where there's been a coach been suggested, hey, this guy kind of wants to help out, or we should bring this guy along, where it's, been a negative thing, because people aren't going to stick their necks out for somebody that isn't, going to hold their weight.
Sure.
So that's kind of one of the cool things, about coaching and kind of the network. Wouldn't say that I hired anybody specifically just because they were my friend. I knew that they all could bring something to the table. As far as football goes, I mean, in this Coach Blackburn, he's really the only one I've ever been around. I think he's fantastic. You got to find a guy that can coach offensive line, and he's good. And that's probably the most important high school coaching hire that you're going to have. As a head coach, I feel like I could call offense or defense. I don't know that I'd be great at it. But coaching offensive line, I'm pretty certain that I wouldn't be great at doing that. And I don't think there's very many guys that are great at it. So that's
very tough job.
That's probably the most important, hire you can make. And I think we got a pretty good one.
Yeah, I mean, with Aquin going to the 8-man football in 2021, that's just, we're having the new year in 2 days, so that's coming up quick with the next season next year. Kind of what are some of your early plans, and take backs and all that, and are there some pre-plans going in, and kind of what's going on with that right now to get you ready for it in the fall, hopefully?
Yeah. I'd be lying if I said that I was like diving into 8-man scheme, things like that. I'm not, and I don't know that I really will. Kind of the main thing, even now with 11-man, we preach gator tackling, blocking to the whistle, running to the football, things like that. And none of that's going to change, when we go coach 8-man. I solely believe, and, Coach Saban will say this, numerous times, the team that blocks better and tackles better usually wins a football game. And we could play 6-man, 8-man, 22-man. I don't think that would really change. There's some things sometimes, I'll sit down and try to draw up 8-man plays and think about things like that. We're really hoping for a spring season that's 11-man still. So hopefully we get worry about that. And then once that season's over, I feel like I work better under pressure. So hopefully I'll just have to, really think on the fly of what we're going to do. But just the scheme of things going to 8-man, we're still going to do our tackling circuits and our blocking circuits. And I think, especially from the first year I got to Aquin to, our second year, and then now this will be our third year, just our ability to stay on blocks and to make open field tackles and meet guys in the hole and doing it, the way we've been teaching it, we're seeing success from that. And I think that's the most important part of coaching actual football, is teaching those skills like that. We had our first year at Aquin, I think our turnover ratio, we were in the negatives, which you're not going to be successful if you're turning the ball over more than you're taking it away. And then last year, I think we were plus 18, which we had 18 more takeaways than we had turnovers. Just little things like that. That's far, far more important than if we're running option or air raid. And that stuff's going to stay with it, the program, as we move to 8-man. So those little things won't change. We'll have to change a little bit of scheme. But if we got dudes that can tackle and dudes that can block and, a couple guys that can run, hopefully faster than the other guys, I think we'll be okay. So we'll worry about that scheme stuff, hopefully, come summertime after we've played a successful spring season, hopefully.
Yep, exactly. And speaking of the spring season, I really hope you guys are able to get that in. We'll see what happens, especially with my brother. I'd love to see you guys get that.
Yeah, we've been, I talk to those guys all the time. And as coaches, I feel like it's, especially during this time, and as kids, I don't even know what, I couldn't even relate. But it's hard, to stay positive. But kind of going back to that motivation stuff and, teaching leadership and perseverance, we preach that. I think I try to touch on it every day in practice, control what we can control. We do a thing at the start of minicamp, or I guess not really minicamp, but what would be 2 days, first couple practices. And I try to do something like this every year. Last year we took stickers, just all kinds of different colors, and for really no random reason, put them on kids' helmets and didn't tell the kids anything. And so the kids, they're wondering what the heck is this sticker on my helmet for? What does it mean? They're asking coaches, and we're not going to tell them anything. But it kind of ruffles them a little bit. Kids don't like to be held in the dark about things. So at the end of practice, get together after all the coaches talk. We kind of talk. What color sticker did you get? What do you think it meant? What about this? What about that? And really just the main thing for them is the stickers meant nothing. It was really just a test to see how you could handle, something that you can't control. Because in life, in a game, there's tons of factors, our starting quarterback goes down. We can't control that. A ref makes a call against us. We can't control that. Things like that you can't control. But, even with the sticker and in life and in football, you can control, your effort, how you felt about it, your attitude, things like that. And I feel like that's more reflectant today and with just the world, that we're living in now with, hopefully getting to play football in the spring. But ultimately it's kind of out of their control, which is sad and unfortunate. And I shouldn't be like that. But what's your response going to be? I told them when we ended summer camp, if we play in the spring, which I'm hoping and praying that we get to, are you going to be ready? That's on you. That's not on anybody else. And you can be mad at everybody else in the world, but will you be ready when the time comes? Because I solely believe, and I've said it since day one, I think we're going to play some games. I don't know how many. I don't know if there'll be a state championship, but if there's games to be played.
No, there's going to be a season.
I want to win.
Along some lines.
Yeah, so if there's going to be something to do, then we need to be ready for it. So I think our guys, they're upset and it's depressing and it's hard. And, it's scary that there is a chance there might not be a season, but it's also kind of scary to think that you could play a game and lose, like that's scary too. But there's no reason not to give effort to be ready for that game or to be ready for that season. So that's kind of the approach we've took, and I think it's worked. Kids, I see kids working out. I know they're working out. I know we'll be ready when the season happens. So hopefully, we get something.
Yeah, well, let's hope and pray for that. Some football is better than no football.
Absolutely.
For sure. But I kind of wanted to get into. I know you've spoken on some motivation stuff, leadership, perseverance, and talking about what kind of goes into being a football coach. But for you, what are some of the behind the scenes work that goes into being a football coach?
I think the biggest thing, and my wife would probably be shocked, but I try to be super organized and always prepared for something. Because that's not my personality at all. When I'm outside of coaching, I would say I'm more of a, well, we'll see what happens kind of guy. But when it comes to like a practice plan or, what we're meeting for before practice or after practice, I'm kind of anal about that stuff. So being organized, always having a plan and then kind of having a backup plan, because your plan's never going to go perfectly. That's a huge part of being a head coach. I've never had, I think being upfront with parents is a super important part of coaching. Sometimes you got to tell them things they don't want to hear, but it's better to let them know than just brush things to the side, and there's never, all a parent wants to know is that you have the best interest for their son or daughter, at heart. And I think all of us on staff right now, we do, we're never going to do something out of spite, to try to prove a point to a kid or to a parent. Like that's not even worth the time. Being upfront with that stuff's huge. And as a young coach, and I don't have any kids, so that's something too. Like I can't really relate to how a parent feels if they feel that their kid's, being treated unfairly or unjustly. I can't relate to that, yet. But I feel like just being upfront, and I feel like everybody knows, that we have the best interest, in our interest and for their kids. I think that's a huge part, of kind of having no confrontations really or no issues to deal with. I think another big thing that we've tried to do and that I solely believe in, and we did this in college, and at the time I thought it was a total joke as well, but we always do kind of like I don't know, call it more like a mental training camp, like it's easy to talk about being mentally tough and having perseverance and, being disciplined and giving effort. And I found this out a lot at Freeport, if you don't really spell out what that looks like or what that means or how that's going to benefit, it's really, you're just blowing smoke, so teaching, well, this is what effort looks like. And this is how it's helped some famous athlete in the NFL. You hear stories like Walter Payton run up and down this hill hundreds of times a day, things like discipline. And we got a guy, Fred Van Fleet, lives right down the road, in Rockford, and his discipline is probably the best of any area player that you've ever heard of, going to the gym at like 5:30 in the morning to shoot hoops all day and just being so disciplined, so giving examples and teaching, this is what discipline looks like, and this is how it can benefit you. And this is how these high level dudes do it. You know what I mean? You look at, I just saw the graphic of Cam Newton getting up at 4:30 in the morning every day. I wouldn't say right now it's really helping him a lot because I don't think he's playing that well, but like that's discipline. And those dudes are elite level athletes. You're 5'10", 150-pound junior wide receiver, like you need to be elevated in your discipline, to be really, really successful, so showing them and teaching, that's a huge part of head coaching. Since I've become a head coach, I've kind of stepped away a little bit from X's and O's stuff and really dived into that stuff, because I think that's ultimately what wins football game.
Yeah. For sure.
No, you made a good point there, just because some people think there's just like a secret fairy dust or pixie dust that can just make you a good athlete. And it's a maturation over time.
For sure.
Some people don't get that. And when they can see that with somebody that's doing the same drills as them and they're making the millions of dollars, and sometimes people just need to see it as that black and white and that specific. And that's what will make it click. And you sound like you're doing a lot of those good things, and it's awesome to hear that. But kind of switch it up and make it a little fun here. What's some of the players maybe that you kind of watched growing up? Was some of your favorite ones? College, NFL?
Yeah.
I mean, people you played with?
Yeah. Growing up, I was, kind of a bigger, sort of slow running back linebacker. So I loved Mike Allstott, running people over. That was awesome. I remember as a young kid, this is kind of funny. And I don't know if you guys did this or not, but like Little League, Mike Piazza, I played catcher. So he's my favorite catcher. So in my Little League hat, I wrote Mike Piazza, but I spelled it Mike Pizza. So my parents always made fun of me forever about that. Those Italian last names are hard. But Mike Piazza, Pudge, he was probably my favorite player. I loved Ray Lewis just because, dude had so much passion, like when he played and when he talks, and even still, like that dude will get you pumped up when you listen to him.
He has that war
He was
mentality.
definitely one of my favorites as far as that goes. And then, some guys I played with in college, we had a guy, Ryan McQuethy, who was an absolute freak athlete. He actually made it to the NFL a little bit, made some practice rosters. He was just a freak and a super nice guy. And then just really, the cool thing, and I try to tell, the guys on my team now, like, your friends in high school, they'll always be your friends. And if you go back to the town you live in, they're still going to be your friends. But like the people you meet in college, and especially like my best friends from college, I all play football with. And I talk to those guys more than, the guys I went to high school with. And it's nothing against those guys, but when you're there, at that level, you're a little bit more mature. You realize that these guys have probably a lot more of the same interests that you do. Those are my friends, forever. And I respect all those guys that I played football with in college, and a lot of them, we stay in touch, maybe not text every day, but, we talk to each other pretty regularly. So I look up to all of those guys. Some of the players that I've coached, you guys are buddies with Chavers. He's a great kid. He's been awesome to coach. We talked about discipline a lot. Zeke Vandenberg, he was awesome to coach. I don't know if I've ever met an adult or a kid that's more disciplined than that kid. He eats, breathes, sleeps
everything
football, man. Talking to him
from when he gets up till he goes to bed.
But and that's going to make it. He's got a legit shot to play on Sundays, I think, at this point, because nobody's more disciplined than him. He's worked his tail off. Some of those guys, it's awesome coaching guys like that. Like Brady just totally changes to who he was as a player in a year. And I asked him one day, I was like, what changed? Like, you're okay as a junior, but as a senior, like, it was insane. And he's like, I don't know. One day I just realized that I kind of want to be the best player on the team. And I started working like I wanted to be the best player on the team. And it just like something that simple, he obviously had tools and strength and things like that, but just like, that's where I feel like the mindset stuff is kind of justified. If one kid can just flip in his head, like, I want to give this effort and I want to be this disciplined and I can be the best player and then be an honorable mention all-state kid. And nobody would have picked that for him as a freshman. That's where that stuff even gets more validated, I feel like.
No, for sure. I 100% agree. And I saw it with Brady firsthand, but just the hard work putting it in. And like you mentioned,
he was running through our neighborhoods back in the summertime with stocking caps on and sweatpants.
He had that crazy mentality. Like, you look at it sometimes when you see players just doing crazy things, you're like, how in the hell do they decide to do that? But it's mentality. It's having that itch to want to be
that's
great.
why people make it, and some
for
don't.
sure.
Oh, exactly. So I kind of wanted to just say I appreciate you joining us, and I kind of learned a lot about coaching and some tools that I could take into studying as I become, hopefully, down the road, a coach. But before we wrap this up, I kind of wanted to ask you, we asked this question for everybody to end it. Do you have any specific advice for us with this podcast? Like any special guests you think we should reach out to, or anything that you think we should cover specifically?
Yeah, no, keep doing what you're doing. I think, I don't know how far you want to go with the podcast. With going to Whitewater, Bryce, especially, I mean, there's a whole staff up there. I mean, I don't know if you've met Coach Bullis before at Whitewater, but he's an awesome dude. And, I mean, they're about to be playing here pretty soon, hopefully in the spring like us. So I don't know that he'd be super busy or if he'd be busy, right now with that. But the biggest thing, the worst somebody can tell you about anything, and this is anything in life, is the worst they can say is no. So there's no reason not to ask.
Yep.
At least ask somebody, shit. I mean, I don't know if you can say swear on there, but ask Coach Saban. Like, send a message out to somebody. I mean, the worst they're going to say is no. I know Coach Bielema, down in Illinois, he wants to have a presence in Illinois. What's a better way than to get onto some local dude's podcast? You know what I mean? Like, the worst somebody's going to say is no, I can't do this. And with a lot of guys, I think you'll find, and I found this out when asking like high-level college guys, they might say no, but they'll point you to somebody on their staff that does have the time, and that's worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so get coaches on, get different coaches on too. I've learned a lot. I really, really like soccer and kind of the mentality that they have. Like, coaching is so different from football, but I've learned a lot of like how to intertwine different things, from other sports too. And I know all of you guys have played other sports. It's cool to hear what other people do and kind of their mindset and mentality towards things and kind of how to weave that into, what you're doing as well. So don't be afraid to reach out of the box either, I think.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of the whole purpose of us doing this, is just to create that network and establish relationships with people and learn about their side of how they've developed over time and stuff like that.
The biggest thing was we just knew that there was a lot of people around the area. I mean, not even the immediate area, just around the Northwest Illinois area that had a story to tell.
Exactly.
Coaching, I mean, former playing, still currently playing, and that's kind of what our path that we want to go along this, and I think we're doing it so far, and we've been very, what would I say? We varied our guests. I mean, we've had a lot of different guests and type of stuff, and added a head football coach to the list today.
Yeah, well, sure. I appreciate you guys having me on. It was fun. I love talking about this thing.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you very much once again. And episode 8, segment 2 with Broc Kundert will be dropping on Friday. Is that New Year's Day?
Yep.
All right, so that'll be dropping on New Year's Day.
First episode.
You can listen to it while you're watching the college football playoffs.
Yep, there we go.
Should have a decent game on tonight with Florida and Oklahoma, except for I saw Florida's 3 receivers
all declared.
Or they were all out,
and some of them declared.
The whole spread.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a lot of.
Yeah, a whole lot of football coming up, so I'm excited to watch that. But thank you, Coach, and we'll.
Yeah, thanks, Brock.
It's good talking to you guys.
Appreciate it.